Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us at the New England Racing Show. This is Manchester, New Hampshire, Channel 23. Our shows are also up on YouTube and on Facebook. And I'm your host, Bill Sturgis. Well, what we have this week is the last race from the Lee Octoberfest, the Valenti Modifieds. And when I started this show, I said I'm just going to talk about positive things about the racers and the tracks and keep it on that level. But every once in a while you get something that's just so outrageous, so over the top, and so embarrassing that you just can't hold it in. You have to say something. And this is what I'm going to do today, unfortunately. The Valenti Modified series had an incident. I guess everyone's familiar with the Michael Waltrip story where they tried to manipulate the outcome of one of the NASCAR races in order to get one of their team members in a chase, and they got caught cheating, and NASCAR came down pretty hard on them. Well, we had our own Michael Waltrip incident here in the Valenti Modified series. They had their heat, and they had 3 heats, and we're going to show you one of them here. It's compliments of Dave McGuire videos. Dave tapes all the races at Star and Hudson Speedways, and you can see his videos on YouTube under Dave McGuire Videos, and he was good enough to loan us his copy of this heat. So what we have here is 10 cars. The first 6 make the feature. The last 4 go to the Consi. Last 4 finishers. Except for Stevie Massey in the black 13 in the 4th row inside. He's got a provisional, so he's all set, but he's going to run the heat anyway. So what we have here is cars going about a second slower than they usually do. And the front row, as you can see, they're blocking the track so nobody can pass them. And this way, they make the feature, and by going about a second slower than usual, they get to save their tires. Whereas if they tried to race, they'd, put 10 laps of wear and tear in their tires, and they don't really want to do that. So I guess they figured, let's just hold everything up and make it so we'll make the feature and the ones in the back won't. I think what they failed to take into account is that Saturday was pretty cold and drizzly all day, and the fans that paid extra money to sit in the stands were led to believe that they were going to see a race, and all they saw was a parade or a charade, whatever way you want to put it. Being a fan for many, many years, almost 40 years, going to these tracks and sitting in this kind of weather watching, I can appreciate that the fans would feel ripped off, because that's exactly what they were, was ripped off here. You sit in the stands, it's 45 degrees, it's drizzling, and you have to watch this. It's really embarrassing. Now, I don't know who was up in the tower from the Valenti Modified series, but I know there's someone like Tom Curley that runs the ACT Tour was sitting up there. He'd have red flagged this race with a couple of laps to go, and he probably would have gone down on the start-finish line and dragged some of these people out of their cars and thrown them out of the track, from what I understand, the way he runs his show. But nothing was done. Not a thing. They let it go. And the announcer, I don't think he even knew what was going on, because he was calling this race like it was the most exciting thing that ever happened. And here's a finish.
Richard Savory, Max Zackham, Joe Doucette, and Les Hinkley III will advance.
Now, I know Jake Dorr, my son, is a friend of his, and he finished next to last, because he couldn't pass anybody, and he was really, really upset. He had to run the Consi. I think he finished second or third in the Consi, and he made it to the feature. But after a 25-lap Consi, his tires were shot. And halfway through the feature, he pulled off. He says, I can't even control the car, because he had to run all those laps. And same with Dwight Jarvis. I think he finished the feature, but he wasn't a factor. And it's just not fair. I mean, I took the time to email the director of the Valenti Modifieds series, tell him that I wasn't real happy with what happened in that heat, and that what they should have done was red flag the heat with a couple of laps to go. Gone down there, taken the front row, say, okay, now you're the back row. We'll see if you still want to ride around a second slower. And now you can run the Consi and wear your tires out and be a non-factor in the feature. Or invert the whole field. So I sent an email to the Valenti Modified series regarding that. And guess what I got back for reply? Nothing. They just totally blew me off. Which means they don't even care about the fans. They don't mind if the races are fixed, manipulated, whatever you want to call them. They don't care if the fans don't like it. There's just nothing. So, I mean, with the state of short track racing the way it is now, the last thing we need is fixed races and the series just totally ignoring the fans, ripping them off, charging them extra to go see a race that's not a race. And I don't know what their thinking is, but you see some people in victory lane, some of the drivers, and they'll thank the fans for coming. Without you, we're nothing. I guess the Valenti series doesn't seem to feel that way. I don't know what they're thinking, but anyway, thanks to Dave McGuire for loaning us that heat video. And I taped the entire feature, so we're going to go to that now. And we skipped a little bit in the middle because the feature, here's the start, is 100 laps. And we know some of the drivers here. We raced with them in quarter midgets. And we said, you know, what do you think of these 100-lap races? They said, well, you ride around for 50 or 60 laps, pretty much like they did in the heat. Then you come in, they allow you to do a tire swap, and they'll take the right front and put it on the right rear and maybe change another tire or whatever. Then they go back out, and that's when the real racing starts. So, I mean, you get 100 laps of a so-called race with only about 40 or 50 laps of racing. I'm not a fan of these long races. The only exception I found to the long races that were really exciting was the SBM 125 at Star back in the summer. We stood down on the infield by the first turn light pole, and it was pretty amazing. I didn't see too much riding around there, probably because it wasn't the Valenti Modified series sponsoring it. It was an open show. And all the best were there, the tour drivers and everybody. So there was no riding around like there is here. If you weren't really going for it, you were going to end up in the back. But anyway, I'm not a fan of these long races. We went to Pass likes to do that, the Pass Tour. We went to Beach Ridge to race, and the Pass Tour was there. And they had a 200-lap race. We stood there and watched about 80 laps of it, and then we left. I mean, it was obvious they were just riding around in the beginning, and I saw a pass race at Star, and it was the same thing. The last 10 or 15 laps was the most exciting 10 or 15 laps I'd ever seen that of Pro Stock racing, but you know, the first 150 laps or whatever is just boring. I don't know if they're trying to copy NASCAR with these long races and the pit stops, but if you look at NASCAR, you watch these races and the stands are half empty. The races are way too long. Everybody's complaining about that. And I don't know why you would want to copy that. Whereas if you look at, say, a World of Outlaws race, 40 laps, balls to the wall, and it's all-out racing. Same with the NEMA, the Northeast Midget Association. It's just start to go, 30, 25, 30 laps, and all action from start to finish. So I really don't see the need for these type of races. I don't know why they can't run, say, 60 laps, and not to mention it's also going to save the competitors some expenses. There's got to be a lot of wear and tear on your engine and your whole car to be racing these long races where you could just run, you know, 75 laps and no pits, no changing tires unless you get a flat. My favorite race is the super modified race at Lee. Unfortunately, it got rained out this year, but I mean, start to finish, there's no putting around. It's the most exciting race out there. If the supers can do it, I don't know why the modifieds can't do it. I don't know why the Pass Tour can't do it. The ACT races are kind of long also. I mean, you go to Lee or Star on a weekly show and you see great racing. And, you know, you get home by 9, 10 o'clock, whatever. There's no need for this. So this is the beginning of the race where they're just putting around, saving their tires. Kind of like the senior tour. When they showed up at Lee, they just paraded around, and except for one guy, he actually raced in one of the heats, and he won by a half a lap. We were sitting in the infield there where the trailers are, and we're going, man, is this guy flying? So he wiped everybody out. That didn't sit too well with the race director of the senior tour. She went over and after the heat told him to load up and get the hell out of here and don't come back. So I guess they taught him a lesson. Poor guy thought he was actually there to race. He didn't realize it was a wrestling type show where you just go out there and put on a show and not race. But I guess you get the hint after a while. And, you know, I'm not blaming the racers themselves. These guys, if you allow them to do that in order to win, or you say they have to do this to win, that's what they're going to do. A lot of them. So it's the Valenti series that encourages this to go on, and then they don't do anything about it. Now my feeling is that you go to see this series, and I talked to one promoter, he said that when the Valenti series would come to their track, and this was a few years ago, that they could count on 800 extra people at the front gate. But if they're going to put on, you know, manipulated or fixed races, parading around slow, or this type of stuff where you just ride around for 60, 70 laps, then I don't know if they're going to keep getting 800 people. And if they don't, then they don't get the purse. So they're only hurting themselves. And then, you know, it started out as a nice series where it was the alternative to the NASCAR Tour, which had the long, boring races on the big tracks. And these guys were going to run the bull rings, which would be lower cost engines. You know, you don't need a $70,000 engine like you do in the NASCAR Tour. You can build your own, like Jake Dorr builds his own engines, and probably get away for $10,000, which makes it affordable and brings in more cars. But then in their wisdom, the Valenti people said, well, let's start running the big tracks like Thompson and Stafford. Now we're going to have to spend $20,000 or $30,000 for your engine to keep up, because $10,000 just won't cut it. And let's run the long, long races. So they're trying to, you know, the NASCAR Tour is in my opinion, pretty dire straits. All I see is Blewett. I think it's Jimmy, the surviving brother, says he can't afford to do it anymore. There's other people dropping out. The Len Bowler number 3 car isn't going to run the full schedule. They're going to try the Valenti series. And it's getting to the point where the Tour is just going to have, well, we're going to skip a few minutes here because we didn't want to just keep showing the parade. We'll skip a little bit further where the real racing will come in after they go in and swap tires. What I'm getting at is these people that run these series, like the NASCAR Modified series, they don't seem to listen to the racers. They seem to just do what they want to do and then tell the racers, this is what we're going to do, and that's that. And I read in Area Auto where Eddie Flemke Jr. spoke out about that. He said, I can't really afford to run this anymore either, this modified tour, and it's not fun anymore when you're, instead of paying all your bills and fixing up your house, you're spending it on a racing engine. So, you know, this is all brought on by themselves. I hate to see the Valenti series go in this direction because, I mean, I just love modified racing. And there's so many of us in the Northeast that do love it. We're on lap 59 now. So you'll probably start to see some racing coming in soon. I think some of them will be coming in to do their tire swaps. And we'll have another restart. I hate to spend the whole half hour in the soapbox, but I wasn't even going to show this race, but I just feel there's a necessity to do so. And that's Stevie Massey out front in the black 13. And he's a real hard charger. I mean, he's not going to be manipulating any races. Stevie's just an awesome driver. He raced quarter midgets with him for several years. And he races these like he raced the quarter midgets, all out. But I do want to point out that as we get towards the end of this race, the first 4 cars that were in that heat, that parade heat, I'll call it, and they saved their tires, they ended up being the first 4 finishers. What a coincidence, huh? So in a way, the outcome of the feature isn't directly manipulated, but I mean, it just wasn't fair. That the other, out of the 3 modified heats, the one that they just rode around and saved their tires, they ended up being in the first 4 in the feature. And that was Tommy Barrett, Les Hinckley, 99 Richard Savory. I won't say Stevie Massey because he wasn't taking part in that. He finishes high up no matter what. So Jake Dorr was in the infield. His tires were shot. Now I understand that the Valenti series did try to do something about this the next week, saying that if your car is much slower than it should have been, that they'll black flag you. And I think they tried doing that at Thompson. I didn't go on to Thompson, so I'm not sure what happened. But they never replied to my email. But like I said, they need to do something to change the handicapping system in the heats. I guess the ACT Tour doesn't allow for that kind of stuff. Maybe they can take a page from the ACT Tour. And like I said, if Tom Curley was up in the tower and saw that going on in one of his races, he'd run down there and do something about it. He wouldn't even let the race finish. I think they should have inverted the whole field and said, okay, if you want to putt around in the back, go ahead. But that's real disappointing that the Valenti had all night to think about this, and they didn't do anything about it. They let the feature go off without any punishment, and the first four that saved their tires were the first four finishers. So here's Tommy Barrett heading towards the front. He's pretty good at that. He swaps tires and then he charges pretty hard. And Tommy's a great driver. We race quarter midgets with him, and he's one of the best to come out of quarter midgets. I understand he's going on the NASCAR modified tour next year, and I'm sure he's going to do well. He has a good car and a good crew, and he's a great driver. He's only 20 years old. Okay, we got something in the third corner here. The number 5. Chris Pastriak pulling off there, driving away from the scene. And this is lap 75. 25 to go. So here's the restart. And Stevie Massey in the front. I believe that's Richard Savory next to him in a 99. There's Tommy Barrett in third, Les Hinckley in fourth. Hard to believe this was almost 2 months ago. It was October 12th and 13th, and here we are in December. So maybe the winter will go by pretty fast. On Facebook, a lot of people are working on their cars. Some are buying new machines. A couple of NEMA Light people. One of them is moving up to this series here. That's Carl Medeiros Jr. He was the champion of the NEMA Light series this year, and he's got a Valenti car, and he's also got a TQ midget, 3/4 midget, and which they raced down at the Wall Turkey Derby this past couple of days. We'll have to find out how Carl did. Carl's another up-and-coming charger. He'll be in the mix after a few races. It might take a year or so to get going. But they have a lot of good stars in this series. I just feel that the Valenti series has to get their priorities right and maybe stick with the short tracks. That's Andy Seiss in the 70. He hit the wall pretty hard. He runs the Southern Modified Tour, and he had to go off on a flatbed, unfortunately. Bent the rear axle, the right front. And here's, I believe this is the last restart of the race. Stevie Massey still hanging in there. There's Tommy just sticking it in there, and Richard had to give way. Well, Tommy's faster, so it was a good move on Savory's part. And see if we can catch Stevie. I remember at the SBM 125 at Star, those two were tearing through the field after the tire change. And it was a Stevie and Tommy show. Two hard chargers. I think Tommy broke in that race. Stevie ended up doing really well. There's Tommy getting under him. And once he's out front, it's goodbye. This was Sunday. The heat race that I was talking about was on Saturday. That's lap 92, by the way. 8 to go. Sunday turned out to be a real nice day. They had a real good crowd, too. Whereas Saturday was, the heat races were pretty miserable and drizzly. Those were the hardcore fans there Saturday. Two to go coming up. Tommy Barrett pulling away. And the rest of them. Stevie's got a little lead, and then the next three. One to go. And that's it. Tommy Barrett's a winner. Stevie Massey second. Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to wrap it up, and we'll see you next week.